Hello, everyone, and welcome to Anthony's Career Advice. My name is Anthony, and I am providing you with career advice. The topic of today is micromanagement, or better yet, how to work with a micromanager. Micromanagement is sometimes a challenge, especially if you don't know how to define it. And if we're experiencing it, or if we have the, privilege of working with a micromanager, we assume that they are mean people, angry people, villains of some sort, or have a goal of trying to make someone's life misery. Uh, and that can be true in some cases, but for the most part, most people who are micromanagers tend to be so because they are either new to people leadership and it's foreign to them. Chances are they're also very strong individual contributors, which means they made they were very good at meeting expectations or targets or whatnot and had a specific code or work ethic that brought them success. And they believe that's the only way of doing things. And the other thing that stands out when thinking about micromanagers is that they tend to lead with fear. And mostly it's fear of not being in the loop or feeling that they don't have all the information. And that is true. So what I want to do today is talk to you a bit about how to work with a micromanager if you're in that situation, because it's ultimately a skill. I mean, I've worked with some clients who say that I'm going to leave because of my manager, and most people tend to leave because of leadership. That is very true. But before someone decides to do that, I think it's important to say, well, here's the situation that I'm in. I'm going to see if I can fix it or make the most out of it and learn from it. Why? Because there's a likelihood that I will be faced with something similar again in the future. And at that point, do I just pick up and leave again? I mean, how does that help your career? So you want to be careful. So it's not about flight. It could be about fight, but fight in a good way. Okay, so once we get an understanding of who our leader is and if they are a micromanager, we have to understand how they work. Typically speaking, they're ultimately hovering over your shoulder in some capacity, right? They could be asking for check-ins, Zoom calls, regular meetings, more than regular meetings on a daily basis or whatnot. So the trick I find that is very useful is first understanding what their patterns are and getting ahead of it. So if you know that person X that you report to likes things a certain way, then you can't be surprised by them asking for those certain things. So what you can do is try to take a little bit more control. And part of taking control means being able to provide them with what they're looking for before they ask. So for example, if you know that they're going to want to know at least 2 or 3 times a day about something, or maybe 4 or 5 times a day, schedule check-ins, maybe the beginning of the day, around lunchtime, and at the end of the day. And it's not about meetings, it's about just giving them a quick summary. Now, if you're working with them face-to-face, in person, it's one of those walk by their desk and just give them the heads up, hey, here's what I'm doing. If it's not that informal and it has to be a little bit more formal, then send them an IM. Send them an MS Teams meeting. Send them an email just to give them a heads up as to the progress of what you're working on. Because if you do that, there's a high likelihood they're going to leave you alone and focus their micromanagement attention and energy towards somebody else. So the goal here is not to change them. That's not important. Your goal is not to change anybody. Your goal is to say, how do I survive this environment or make the most out of it, and then potentially start to thrive in it by understanding all the players in the game. So that's one way of being able to work with a micromanager. Another thing is to understand where it's coming from. And that could mean, what pressures are they facing, right? What is leadership 2 levels above asking of them? What are the company's main priorities and responsibilities? Because ultimately, everything goes down, right? So we go from senior leadership to mid-management to individual contributors. So wherever you are in that chain, you want to get an understanding of what one level above is looking for. Sometimes you can ask directly to that micromanager. Sometimes if you have a relationship with people who are 1 or 2 levels above them, you can ask them. Sometimes it's just a matter of going to town hall meetings, paying attention to email correspondences or blast emails that happen from an organization, giving everybody an idea of where they are or where the company is. And that's important to do, because if you have an understanding of what the pressures are, you can see how you can be presented as a solution, which ultimately helps your career. So in essence, working with a micromanager could possibly propel you to that next level if your goal is to climb. So understanding what the corporate goals are is very, very important. Other thing too is we have to sometimes take ourselves out of the equation, right? I highlighted this briefly in the intro, is we think it's personal. Now, that could be the case in those rare occurrences where you are being singled out, but a micromanager is not a micromanager to some and then not to everybody. It's kind of a trait. So you have to look at it and say, this is not personal. This is not a reflection of my work. This is not a reflection of my efforts. This has more to do with someone's inability to trust, right? So because of that, I can't take this personally, or I have to at least try not to take this as personally as possible. Yes, I know what I'm asking you to do because it is happening to you. I'm asking you to kind of separate yourself from the equation. And that's easy. It's easier said than done. I know this, but it can be done. It's almost like you want to take some time and reflect. Get yourself out of that situation and say, okay, objectively speaking, is this person malicious? Is their intent evil, let's say? Chances are no. So once we kind of get an idea of understanding that this isn't about you, you can kind of accept it a little bit more. Now, is it fair? No. But the misconception is that work is supposed to be fair. Work at its core is simple. It's compensation for services rendered and providing a safe work environment. Right? Those are key components of any healthy working environment. When we incorporate or add a micromanager to the mix, we can kind of understand the pressures that come with it, or worry about it and feel a certain way or level of uncomfort that comes with it. But it's very, very important to kind of make sure that when addressing a micromanager, and I mean this as that next step, is addressing a micromanager could mean having that challenging conversation. Can mean, simply put, pulling them aside and saying, we need to talk about our working relationship and our exchange of information and how it's flowing. It may not be working, and your goal should be to make this more efficient and effective. Right? And why is that important? Well, it's important because if you develop that bond or develop a stronger relationship, so even if it's at a negative and at best it goes to par, right? But it's incrementally getting a little bit better, then you win, right? You've developed your interpersonal communication skills, you've identified a problem that you're trying to fix, and you've also prepared yourself for possibly a positive outcome, a better relationship, or at least preparing yourself for the next opportunity, right? So there's a lot of positive that can come with the control that you actually do have in these types of scenarios. So think about what I said today. Hopefully it provides you with some sense of support and help, especially if you're going through an experience right now while working with a micromanager. And like always, if you found that this video was helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned.